Welcome to Tea Time with the New Jersey Tea Party Coalition. Today we have a very interesting and important topic. We'll be talking about the 10th Amendment. Most of you are familiar with the Bill of Rights. The last one, the 10th Amendment, is probably one of the most important. Our guests today are with the New Jersey 10th Amendment Center. We have with us Brenda and Peter. So, the New Jersey 10th Amendment Center. Your mission and your goal is to promote the 10th Amendment?
Yeah, it's really to bring back the 10th Amendment that's really been lost over the years. It's really declares that the states are sovereign, and they have the right as a sovereign state to declare laws that they feel are unconstitutional within the boundaries of that state, and therefore those laws will be null and void. This goes back to the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions, which were written by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison.
Well, before we go there, let's just give a little background for most people. The Constitution is a contract between the various states that establish the federal government.
Correct.
And when they first wrote it, they realized, well, we really need to make sure that rights for the people and for the states are more spelled out than hinted at. Mm-hmm. So we find the First Amendment, which is our freedom of speech and so forth. The Second Amendment, of course, is for having a firearm. And down the list it goes until you get to the 10th Amendment. And with the 10th Amendment, and I don't have my Constitution right in front of me, but basically what it does say is that the enumerated powers in Article 1, Section 8, which are about 23 things that the various states said that this is what the federal government is supposed to be doing. Anything that's not in that list is reserved to the states and to the people. So our founders originally decided in the very beginning that they were going to let the federal government do certain things. Mm-hmm.
That's correct. As you said, the Constitution was ratified by the 13 states. The states were entering into a compact, and when they ratified the Constitution through the state conventions, state ratifying conventions, they retained their sovereignty as a state and delegated those powers to the federal government. And of course, the powers delegated to the federal government are defined. They're limited and defined. The powers left for the states are undefined and limitless, and it's up to the people of the states to define those powers.
Now, offhand, do you recall any of the particular powers that are given to the federal government?
To defend the nation, mm-hmm. Post office. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's enumerated powers.
And they're pretty simple things.
Right. And
coining money.
Yeah, there you go.
Defending the borders, imagine that.
Right, mm-hmm. right. Mm-hmm. And the question is, what do the states do when the federal government assumes powers that weren't delegated? And like Peter always says when we do our presentations, you don't delegate to your boss. You delegate to your subordinate. The states delegated the powers to the federal government, was their agent. And when they overstep those delegated powers, what is the state supposed to do? Wait for a Supreme Court decision? Stay compact? No, they have to step in, interposition, which is, turns into nullification, to arrest the progress of evil, which is what the federal government is doing when it's taking powers that don't belong to it.
So let's go back in history, back to when the Constitution was being written and when it was first ratified. Mm-hmm. The intention was that the states would retain their power to be sovereign individual entities.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
And that they were entering into a contract with one another mm-hmm. as partners to create this corporate entity known as the federal government. Mm-hmm. Now, this idea that any one of the states could choose to say, well, what the federal government is telling us to do, we don't feel that this is what we want it to happen. Mm-hmm. So we're going to nullify that particular order or law from the federal government. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
That's correct. You have to remember that as a country we're very diverse, and there's diverse circumstances for each of the states. And it's not a one-size-fits-all government where we have a centralized government in Washington, D.C., that different areas of the country have different needs, have different people living there, and the one-size-fits-all government will not work in all the states.
Well, it didn't at the beginning, and it probably still doesn't today. We're a little bit more homogenous than we were, say, at the time of the Revolution, or just after, once we started with the constitutional government. The idea of having the states say, well, gee, Washington, we don't want to follow that idea. Which one of the founders, or which founders, had that original concept of being able to nullify an act of the federal government?
Well, we first see nullification. Thomas Jefferson brings it up in the Kentucky resolutions. The Kentucky and Virginia resolutions were written by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. It was in response to the Alien and Sedition Acts.
Okay, so we're talking about a time period that's after the ratification of the Constitution. And is this when Jefferson is president?
He is vice president.
He's vice president at this time.
Adams.
And Adams,
Right
John
after
Adams
that,
is president.
John Adams.
Thomas Jefferson is vice president.
Right. Back then, it was the person who came in second was vice president, which happened to be Thomas Jefferson. So the Alien and Sedition Acts made it illegal to speak out against your federal government. And of course, Thomas Jefferson found this appalling. I mean, this is what we fought the War for Independence over.
Right.
And of course, it's a violation of free speech, our First Amendment. So the Kentucky resolutions were actually anonymously written, and it brings up the word nullification, that when a state declares a federal law to be outside its enumerated powers, it's a usurpation. And therefore that a state can declare that law null and void and is of no force. And Thomas Jefferson refers to nullification as the rightful remedy.
Now, has nullification been used, or if Jefferson proposed the idea, and I think it's pretty well established that he's very well respected as a president, and he was the writer of the Declaration of Independence, although he wasn't in America at the time of the writing of the Constitution. Nevertheless, he is a very strong founding father. And with this idea of nullification that he proposed, was it ever put into action?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Numerous times in the early 19th century. The New England states used it many times. Of course, we just mentioned the Alien and Sedition Acts. But also, the New England states used it against Thomas Jefferson, as a matter of fact, in 1807.
Really?
Of course, the British and the United States were sort of at odds back then in the early 1800s, and the British were raiding the American ships. Thomas Jefferson declared the embargo, put in action the Embargo Act, which made it illegal to trade with the British, to ship to England and to the rest of Europe. New England said, well, wait a minute, this is how we make our living. We build ships, we trade with the British and the rest of Europe. And so we were going to nullify the Embargo Act. We're going to refuse to follow that act, which they did.
Now, the Embargo Act wasn't necessarily, and because they probably didn't have at that time period, presidential executive orders. This was not a presidential executive order?
Back then, sure, they had presidential executive orders.
So this was an executive order from Thomas Jefferson.
Yes.
Now, what if it had been an act of Congress that went through both houses and signed by the president?
Same thing.
Same thing,
yes.
Theoretically, or has that ever happened?
Has happened many times.
Really?
The
Fugitive Slave Act. Fugitive Slave Act was actually used in the 1800s. The Fugitive Slave Act said that any escaped slave found in a state had to be returned to his or her owner. Many of the northern states, Wisconsin in particular, and Pennsylvania, nullified that law. They said that if an escaped slave was found in their state, they were allowed to stay there as a free man or woman. And so they nullified the Fugitive Slave Act.
Wow. So it's a very interesting law. Now, we're going to be going to a break in a minute. And what we want to do is we want people to think about how that has. Well, you were talking about the Fugitive Slave Act, so that was like right before the American Civil War then?
Yes, 1850s.
So that was the 1850s. And maybe you could just quickly tell us, when was the last time nullification was used?
Presently, it's being used as we speak.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
There's a whole litany of subjects that are laws that are being nullified today.
There's a whole list.
Yeah.
We have this historical precedent of states telling the federal government to basically go fish. We don't want to be a part of this. And they were successful.
Yes.
But remember, it's not just nullifying any law the federal government makes. It has to be an undelegated power that they're assuming.
It needs to be a violation of one of those specific powers.
Usurpation of their enumerated powers.
So nullification upholds the Constitution and maintains the Union.
Okay. Within the enumerated powers, there are two that tend to be the ones that are stretched the most to the limit. And that would be promoting general welfare and the Interstate Commerce Clause.
Yeah.
So are we finding that you have states?
Well, as you said, the General Welfare Clause has been stretched to its limits. And the original intent, we always have to go back to the intent when these laws were written and how the founders, their thought process and what these words meant when they voted on them.
Right.
So the General Welfare Clause was actually made for taxation, that any monies collected for taxation would be distributed fairly among the states, that no state or region would benefit more than another state or region through taxation. So that's how today, and of course that's been stretched to the limit.
And also, why would you, if the General Welfare Clause just gave the federal government any power it wants to do whatever it wants from the general welfare, why enumerate then? Why have enumerated powers?
Exactly.
If the general welfare says do whatever you want, you know. So it's just ridiculous how we've let the federal government get this far out of control.
And the Interstate Commerce Clause, of course, back then, the Interstate Commerce Clause was to regulate the trade between the states.
Right. So you
and
wouldn't
back then, the word regulate meant to make easier. Under the Articles of Confederation, the states really had a hard time trading with each other. They were favoring some states over another. So they put that in there to regulate trade between the states to make it easier.
So if New Jersey wanted to buy something from Connecticut, you couldn't have New York all of a sudden put up a fence and say, sorry, Connecticut, you can't travel across.
Yeah, and now it's meant to that, well, the federal government can come in and control any kind of trade between the states, which is simply not so. The federal government is supposed to make it easier for the states to trade with each other.
Right. Well, this is fascinating that there's this element of the Constitution that can be implemented to fix some of the mess that's going on today with the current Congress and executive office.
Yeah.
Just fascinating where we can go with this. So we're going to be going to a break, and when we come back, we want to explore some of the ways that this can be dealt with today. And maybe we'll just touch on maybe that tumultuous time of the Civil War and how things sort of changed in this country. So anyway, folks, we encourage you to go to our website, NewJerseyTeaPartyCoalition.org, where we have many different pages on different topics where you can learn about issues regarding the Constitution, our freedoms, and we encourage you to get involved. It's important for you as a citizen out there to be doing things, to get involved, join with us. If it's only just online or in person at our meetings, we do meet the third Tuesday of every month at 7 o'clock in Rochelle Park. Check our website for details. And we welcome you to just become a part of the movement that is here to save this country.
With all the excitement happening with the Tea Party, it may be a little hard to separate fact from fiction. Find out the truth for yourself. Visit the New Jersey Tea Party Coalition's website at www.njteapartycoalition.org. You may find a common voice to your concerns on how our government is functioning and discover a means to help restore our nation based on the proven principles of our Constitution.
Welcome back to Tea Time. Today we're talking about the 10th Amendment and nullification. With us are two members of the New Jersey 10th Amendment Center. Brenda, before we went for our break, we were talking about the historical aspects of the 10th Amendment and nullification, and the use of nullification in history. Where are we today?
Across the country, nullification is being used, and interposition is the other, phrase that's used for all kinds of things. The Federal Health Care Act recently, totally unconstitutional. States are introducing all kinds of nullification acts, and the 10th Amendment Center has model legislation that some of the states have actually used to nullify the health care. And there's a difference between the health care freedom amendments and health care nullification legislation, which is stronger, has teeth, it has consequences, it has punishments, more or less, that the state would have to carry out. And federal ID, there's a lot of firearms freedoms. There's a whole list. It's on our website.
Well, basically anything that the federal government does that's not in Article 1, Section 8,
right,
in those enumerated powers of specifically what they're supposed to do, the states have the power and say, you don't have the right to do this.
Right. And, everybody talks about getting back to the Constitution. We have to get back to, to save the Republic. If we don't get back to where the states take their rightful place, their authority over the federal government, we're not going to save the Republic, in my opinion.
Now, if a state chooses, the state legislature is the one that gets together and they say this particular law or act is something that we are not in agreement with?
It can be the legislature, the governor.
Executive, the judiciary. Any three branches of a state can declare a federal law nullified.
So here in New Jersey, Governor Chris Christie could just, by an act of the governor of the state of New Jersey, declare a particular federal statute or law or executive order nullified.
Absolutely. The governor of all the governors of the states, the state assembly, the state senates, they have to realize that they have the power. That the governors, Governor Christie, he is the head of a sovereign state. He has as much power as a prime minister of Italy. He's the head of a sovereign state and can declare laws unconstitutional.
So he doesn't need to actually get the entire Assembly and Senate to go along and pass a law or something like that. He could just, by act or writ of the executive powers invested in him as elected official.
Absolutely, yes. Any three branches of government can declare a federal law unconstitutional.
Oh, so the state legislature could do that, or also the New Jersey State Supreme Court?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So why aren't we doing it?
That's a very good question. Of course, here in New Jersey, we have a very liberal Supreme Court. We have a Democratic-controlled Assembly and State Senate. There are nullification bills now in New Jersey, particularly the TSA bills that pretty much sit in committee. Of course, the TSA bills will nullify the illegal searches that are now going on at airports.
Right.
It's a violation of your Fourth Amendment rights, illegal search and siege. But however, we need the citizens of New Jersey to contact their assemblymen, to contact their state senators to move these bills through.
Or re-elect new people.
Or re-elect new people, absolutely.
I mean, I think we can all agree that what's going on in Washington, D.C. is a purposeful attempt to destroy the Constitution. The current occupant of the White House, Mr. Obama, is purposefully trying to destroy this country. And his lackeys and hacks that are involved in Congress and the Senate are the same crowd. They're leftist Marxists, but we as the people, we do have the local power so that we can contact our governor, our legislators, and somehow our Supreme Court, and get some changes done.
And also, it's nullification isn't a Republican issue or a left-right issue or Democrat issue, you know what I mean? There's issues that perhaps Democrats or liberals would like to see nullified. You know, there's medical marijuana issues. There's a million issues, not a million, but there's plenty.
There could be any number of issues that they,
so it's not like a.
They could work both ways.
Yeah.
You know?
The Real ID Act is another act that's being nullified by many states. Unfortunately, New Jersey isn't one of them. Of course, the Real ID Act is making identification cards a national thing, where really it's up to the states to have to issue these identification.
Well, here's a question. Let's say any one of the many things that have gone on in Washington, and either Governor Christie or the state legislature decides that we're going to nullify this act of the federal government. Has or can, or is there a threat that the federal government will somehow make them obey?
Well, there's always the threat of holding back funding. A classic example of that was the 55-mile-per-hour national speed limit. Many states nullified that and said that we're not going to have a 55-mile-per-hour speed limit. We're going to raise it to 65, 75, whatever we want. And, of course, the federal government would threaten that state with holding back funds for road repairs. So there are consequences, but New Jersey really should jump on the nullification bandwagon, so to speak, since New Jersey does receive the least amount of money back from the federal government. We give the most to the federal government, get the least back.
Wouldn't it be an interesting concept to not send the money in the first place?
There is legislation out there. I can't think what state it is right now, but it's the, do you remember the name of it? It's the, oh shoot, I'm going to blank out, but it's on the website. The list of current nullification attempts where the state will hold on to the money. And then only...
Sort of like an escrow?
Exactly, and I can't think of the name of the bill.
If a state feels that money being sent to the federal government is for unconstitutional purposes, they will hold back that funding to the federal government.
Now, how would that work in a practical sense? Since we all file our tax forms, and those of us, like myself, who are self-employed, we write those quarterly checks to the federal government, to the state of New Jersey, and so forth. That check that's going to the IRS, is there a way for the state of New Jersey to sit there in the route of the post office and collect them all back to Trenton and hold on to them, or how does that work?
Well, we have to remember, too, that nullification just doesn't work at a state to federal level. It can work on a local level. The easiest way to do that, to keep track of funds that you feel are unconstitutional, is to go to your local municipalities and get involved with the township committees and see where your tax money is going to be spent on. Of course, the local communities give money to the counties, the states. We can keep track of where our tax money goes. We can do that better at a local level.
Wow. So.
Well, the way the federal government is destroying the dollar, our economy, I almost think we don't have a choice but to nullify. You know what I mean? It's just,
yeah, it really is the only thing that we can do.
Yeah.
And I guess the greatest problem that we probably have here in New Jersey is the fact that most people don't know about this, and the state legislators probably aren't well educated enough to know about it, or if they're Democrat or liberal or Rhino Republicans that don't care either way, they're not going to act on it either. So I guess it's we the people that have to speak up.
Absolutely. We've talked to several state senators and assemblymen, and we've asked their opinion on nullification, the 10th Amendment. One of the state senators actually came back to us and said that, well, we feel that the nullification is really up to the federal government. So he kind of missed the point on everything.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
That's like a conversation I had recently with someone who's running for state senate.
Yeah.
Who I asked him about his stand on the 10th Amendment, and he said, well, you know, I don't believe in unfunded mandates. No, if you just said I don't believe in mandates, then we would have been right.
Yeah. I mean, these ideals, of course, go way back to our early history. And, of course, these aren't taught in the schools anymore. I know I didn't learn it in school. The only way I learned it was by reading about it recently, about the history of nullification and, of course, the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions. And, of course, the schools stay away from it. It's not taught in the schools at all. And I think that's where we have to.
Law schools, too.
Yeah, but even in grade schools, high schools, that's where we have to get the ideals of nullification, the ideals of federalism and state sovereignty, dual sovereignty. That has to be taught in the schools because that's part of our founding, it's part of our history.
Right. Well, it was Mahatma Gandhi who said that if the people will lead, the leaders will follow. So we are the people. The whole Tea Party movement being so organic and the resurgence of interest in the U.S. Constitution is something that I've never seen in my lifetime. And it's just amazing that many of us are discovering that we the people really means that we have the power.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're so in tune with the mindset that everything comes from the federal government. That's the way we've been conditioned, that whatever the federal government says, I guess that must be law. But the founders didn't set it up that way. The founders set it up where we would work from the local community out, that the local communities would govern themselves. If there was any problems, they would go to, the church was always the center of the community. They would go to the church to work out any problems. From there, they would go to their communities, their counties, their state. Everything worked from the bottom out, from the state out.
Right.
And now we have it completely backwards. Everything's coming from the top down, so to speak, from the federal government.
Somebody recently said, we don't have a economic crisis, we have a liberty crisis, which is really what it is.
That's very profound.
Peter Boyce.
We don't have an economic crisis. We have a liberty crisis.
It's true.
That's amazing. Well, you know, folks, we've been covering a very deep topic, but it's really very simple. That we have the power to petition our state of New Jersey legislatures, governors, and just say, listen, we're tired of what's going on in Washington, D.C. We want you to do something about it because we are the state of New Jersey and we are our own branch of We the People, one of the 50 states that makes up this federal union. But it's amazing that we have this power. Thank you so much for being with us today. We encourage you folks to visit the website for the New Jersey 10th Amendment Center, also the national website, and I think we have that up on the screen. Thank you very much. Great to have you with us today. Thank you.
Thanks.